My name is Kyle. If I was to use 3 words to describe myself, it would be easygoing, independent, and loyal.
My name is Jared Edwards, and if I were to describe myself in 3 words, it would be crazy, fun, and interesting.
Hi, my name is Satya. I'm 20, and I tried to come up with 3 words to describe myself, but all I could think of was chaotic.
Hi, my name's Elena. 3 words I would use to describe myself are honest, ambitious, and optimistic.
My name is Maxine, and if I could describe myself in 3 words, it would be artistic, blunt, and kind. I would describe my upbringing as probably in the middle of strict and relaxed. Like, my parents gave me a curfew and, I had things that I had to do around the house, but my mom was very, good in respecting my boundaries and stuff like that, so I'd say probably somewhere in the middle.
Considering I'm the last of 3 children, I feel like by the time I came, my parents didn't care as much anymore.
My upbringing was a decent mix of strict and relaxed. I think my parents set very fair boundaries, and they tried to explain things to us as much as they could, so it never really felt unjust.
I lived in an incredibly strict household until around 18 when I moved out, and then the relationship with my parents has been amazing ever since.
It was a very religious upbringing. So both my parents are pastors, and they were missionaries when I was growing up, so obviously that was a big part of my life. Christianity was a big part of my life. My parents never talked to me about sex growing up, but when they did talk about sexuality or relationships, it was always in terms of the traditional Christian marriage, a man and a woman, and that was the only time it was kind of okay to have sex, and that's what I was taught about sex. But I wasn't taught, anything specific, like the mechanics, my parents have never had the talk with me or anything like that.
My mother gave me the talk one day when I was 16. I think it was 15 seconds, and that is the only conversation we have ever had.
My parents never really talked to me about it. I was lucky enough to have an older brother who was very nice to me growing up, so he kind of helped with stuff like that, but it was never really talked about too much in my house, and most of what I knew was from school.
My parents did talk to me about sex, and I guess she did in her own way talk about sexuality, but it was my parents come from Soviet Union, Russia, so their idea of sexuality is kind of skewed.
My parents did talk to me about sex. Unfortunately, it was because they found my browser history, which led to some very productive but extremely awkward conversations. I was born in Canada, and for the first few years we lived here. I went to Pride, so I still have lingering memories from that, and my parents have had gay friends.
My parents rarely brought up sexuality or sexual orientation. I have an aunt who's gay and is married to a woman now. Just growing up, I didn't know she was gay until later, and then I kind of had to put the pieces together by myself. It wasn't necessarily condemned, but it wasn't talked about openly, so that definitely sent a message to me growing up about how open I should be to the idea at all.
Sex education was taught, and I guess it was what you could describe as the bare minimum. But they didn't force abstinence on us or anything. They knew that things were going to happen, so they were just teaching us how to be safe.
So in school, sex education wasn't really taught. I don't remember a course or something that really specialized in it, even though I believe it's very important and should be taught to all students in high school.
I moved back to Canada and started going to a public high school, and then I was taught, sex ed in grade 9 health, just the basics. They did cover all types of relationships, including gay and lesbian relationships.
There was never any discussion on sexuality, and even when I tried to talk to my teachers, the teacher would not, just out of fear for rumors spreading.
In high school we got it, and it was only in gym class, so you're kind of learning from a gym teacher that doesn't want to be there and a class of students that don't want to be there. The main thing we learned was the importance of abstinence, they would always say, and from that we learned stuff like anatomy or STDs. When I was growing up, sex felt like something that was almost cool in a way, especially growing up with an older brother with older friends, always hearing stories. You always wanted to be in that position, and it just kind of put it to this higher level.
I felt about sex growing up it was, I guess I could say I was ashamed in the beginning. Talking to my mom about it, I started discovering things online, and she caught me, and we had to have the talk, but she was so sweet about it, and she was it's okay, everybody is gonna go through this, and just kind of explain things to me.
PDA is illegal in Dubai. I remember very distinctly once my sister saw my parents kissing, and because she hadn't seen it in public before, she screamed, "Dad, stop eating Mama's face," which is just a really good encapsulation of how little exposure we have to it there.
Because sex wasn't openly talked about, growing up, I felt like it was something that I shouldn't talk about or bring up, so it definitely felt shameful. So it wasn't something that I would ever bring up, even with like my family.
I describe myself as bisexual.
My sexuality, I'm straight.
I like females, and that is pretty much it.
I don't really like identifying with a specific label, but I mainly date women. I'm definitely now a lot more comfortable with my sexuality. I still go through periods of like questioning or internalized homophobia. I think that it might always be there just because of my upbringing.
I am very gay. It took me a long time to acknowledge it and understand it and accept it, coming out of a place where I had little exposure to it, but I feel now a lot more comfortable with my friends and with the community I'm a part of right now.
To think back about how my first time having sex was, it was definitely a little bit scarring. I don't think it necessarily changed me. Maybe emotionally I was like, damn, okay, this is something that maybe I should put more thought into before proceeding with.
After the first time I had sex, I definitely gained a lot of perspective and maturity. It's a big milestone. I think I was 18. It didn't change me as much as I thought it would. Sex is often associated with really strong romantic feelings. What happened with me is I kind of felt like I was missing out on something. I think I kind of rushed myself into it because it felt like something I had to like get over with. Especially when you like the same gender, I think there's a pressure to fully explore your sexuality just to like be sure.
It was with my longtime boyfriend, who I'm still seeing, and it definitely like changed our relationship for the better.
The first time I had sex, it was a spur of the moment, unfortunate decision, which led to a disappointing experience.
I don't think it changed me spiritually or emotionally afterwards in any way, but there was definitely an expectation going into it that it would. It kind of just leaves you feeling the same way, especially when it's someone that you don't really care about, and it felt like you were just trying to get it out of the way, losing your virginity.
I've definitely had casual relationships, but most of my relationships have been more committed and long-term.
I have some bad history with trying to form romantic relationships. All my sexual encounters have been casual.
So far, all of my sexual experiences have been in like casual settings, casual relationships.
Having a long-term relationship is much more like rewarding when you have sex. I feel like you actually have a bond with that person. If I was to talk to my younger self about sex, I would definitely say not to rush into anything, as well as relationships, and having a bond with that person is very important to me now. It's much more rewarding and it feels much better.
Yeah, I think I would have liked to have told myself to wait for my first time to be with somebody who I had more of an attraction and connection to, rather than just to get it over with, because it's not that I regret the experience, but I look back on the experience with regrets.
Try to take things as slow as we can and not to feel pressured to do anything, mainly because I think it just gets rid of some possible emotional damage and things like that.
Find someone who you know you can trust and try stuff you want to with them.
Don't let it weigh on the back of your mind. It's not a race. You'll find the right person eventually.
Also, to just not feel ashamed that you're behind other people, because it's everybody at their own pace, so you don't need to feel that way.
Yeah, first time I had sex with a girl, I was like, oh, this is what everybody's talking about. This is what the big fuss is about.
It's definitely important and you learn a lot of stuff making mistakes with sex and relationships, but it does take some time to get to that point.